In a time when Israel was crushed beneath the iron grip of the Philistines, God raised a deliverer, a man set apart from birth, a man whose strength was not his own. From the vineyards of Timnah to the battlefield of Lehi, this is the story of a warrior, a judge, and a legend. This is the tale of Samson and the lion, a story of divine power, betrayal, and unstoppable destiny. Stay with us, because what happens next will shake the very ground of history. The birth of a deliverer. The sun hung lazily in the sky above the land of Zorah, its golden rays bathing the hills in soft warmth. But the warmth in Israel's heart had long since faded. For 40 years, the Philistines had ruled over God's people with an iron hand. Their warriors patrolled the borders, their merchants filled Israel's markets, and their gods mocked Yahweh openly. Israel's cries for deliverance rose like smoke from a fire that never went out. In a quiet village on the slopes of the hill country lived a man named Manoah, a God-fearing Danite. His wife, her name lost in Scripture but known in heaven, carried a grief too heavy for words. She was barren. Each night, while others cradled their children, she stared at empty hands. But one day, everything changed. As she worked near her home, a figure appeared in the shimmering light of noon. His presence was overwhelming, neither fully man nor fully of this world. His eyes burned like fire, but carried the peace of still waters. "Woman," the stranger spoke, his voice like the echo of eternity, "though you are barren, you shall conceive and bear a son." The woman's hands trembled, the basket of grain slipping from her grasp. "Your son," the angel continued, "shall be a Nazirite unto God from the womb. No razor shall touch his head. He shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hands of the Philistines." Her lips quivered. Who are you?" The figure smiled faintly. "Why do you ask my name, seeing it is wonderful?" And then, like a flame consumed by the wind, he vanished. Breathless, she ran to her husband. "A man of God came to me," she cried. "His face was like the angel of the Lord. He told me I would bear a son." Manoah, though a man of faith, needed assurance. He prayed, "O Lord, let the man of God come again, that we may learn what we shall do for the child." God heard him. The angel returned. Manoah followed his wife out to meet the holy messenger. "Tell us," he pleaded, "what shall be the manner of the child's life?" "Let the mother keep herself holy," the angel instructed. "No wine, no unclean food, for the boy is set apart from the womb." Then, in awe, Manoah prepared a young goat for sacrifice. As the flames rose, the angel ascended in the smoke, disappearing into heaven. Manoah and his wife fell to their faces. "We shall surely die," Manoah whispered, trembling. "We have seen God." But his wife, her eyes wet with hope, said, "If the Lord desired to kill us, he would not have promised us a son." And so, in due time, she bore a child. They named him Samson, meaning little son. From his earliest breath, the Spirit of the Lord began to stir within him. Yet no one in Zorah, no one in all of Israel could have imagined how this child would grow, or the roaring lion that would one day test his strength and his destiny. The roar in the vineyard. Years passed in the quiet hills of Zorah. Samson grew tall and broad-shouldered, his hair untouched by a razor, flowing down his back like dark streams of midnight. From childhood, he was different. When other boys wrestled for fun, Samson's strength frightened them. He could lift stones grown men could not move and outrun goats across the hills. The elders whispered, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon him." Yet Samson was not merely a man of brute force. His heart was restless, a furnace of purpose he could not fully understand. He often wandered the vineyards and fields, staring toward Philistine territory with a gaze that pierced the horizon. One day, during the season of the grape harvest, Samson descended from the hill country toward Timnah, a Philistine town. There, among the bustling markets and laughing women drawing water from the wells, he saw her, a young Philistine maiden, graceful as the first bloom of spring. Her laughter rang like silver bells. Samson's heart, mighty as it was, trembled. He returned home and said to his parents, "I have seen a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the Philistines. Now get her for me to be my wife." His father, Manoah, frowned. his mother's face clouded with worry. "Samson," Manoah said, "is there no woman among our people? Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines?" But Samson's eyes burned with a strange certainty. "Get her for me," he said firmly. "She pleases me well." What neither Manoah nor his wife understood was this: the Lord was at work. God would use this very path to provoke a conflict with the Philistines, a spark that would ignite a fire of deliverance. The journey to Timnah. The next day, Samson set out again for Timnah. The sun hung high in the sky, spilling heat across the land. The vineyards along the road were heavy with ripened grapes, their sweet scent mingling with the hum of bees. His parents traveled some distance behind, discussing their son in hushed voices. Samson, walking ahead, reached a quiet stretch of road flanked by vineyards. The air was still, unnaturally still. Even the birds ceased their singing. Then it came. A sound. Low at first, then rising, a deep, guttural roar that split the silence like a blade. From the shadows of the vineyard, a lion leaped out. Its golden mane blazed in the sunlight, its fangs gleamed, and its eyes, wild and merciless, locked onto Samson. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The beast's growl rumbled like distant thunder. Its paws crushed the earth beneath it as it sprang forward. Any ordinary man would have fled. But in that instant, the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon Samson. The clash, power, otherworldly and raw, surged through Samson's veins. His heart pounded, not with fear, but with a strength that was not his own. With a roar of his own, Samson met the beast head-on. He seized it by its jaws. The lion writhed, its claws slashing the air, its breath hot and foul against his face. But Samson's hands, strengthened by the Spirit, held fast. He wrenched its jaws apart as though it were nothing more than a young goat. Bones cracked. The mighty beast fell limp in his grip. Samson stood over it, chest heaving, the scent of crushed grass and blood thick in the air. His parents, still far behind, had seen nothing. He left the lion's carcass where it lay, saying nothing of what had happened. But deep in his heart, Samson knew this was no ordinary encounter. It was a sign, the sign of the roaring lion. That night, as the stars stretched across the heavens, Samson lay awake. He could still feel the lion's roar in his bones. Was it only an attack or a message from God? He remembered the scriptures his mother had read to him, the stories of Gideon, of Deborah, of the God who raises deliverers. And though he did not yet understand it, the lion was more than a beast. It was a symbol of the Philistines who ruled over Israel, of the dangers that stalked his people, and of the war he was born to fight. For now, he kept the secret to himself. But destiny had already begun to roar, and Samson was only beginning to hear it. The riddle of honey and strength. The sun had barely risen when Samson once again made his way down to Timnah, this time with a lighter step. The Philistine woman he had chosen stirred something fierce and undeniable within him. His parents followed, still uneasy but unable to stop their son. As they traveled, Samson's mind wandered back to the place of the roaring vineyard, to the carcass of the lion he had slain. A strange pull, part memory, part curiosity, drew him aside from the road. The carcass in the vineyard. The vineyard was quiet, its grapes glistening with morning dew. And there it was, the lion's body. Time had reduced its fierceness to nothing but bones and hide. Yet something unusual caught Samson's eye. Inside the hollow of the lion's ribcage was a swarm of bees. Samson stepped closer, astonished. Not only bees, but honey. Rich, golden honey pooled within the carcass, as though nature itself had chosen this beast as a vessel for sweetness. Samson's lips curled into a slow, knowing smile. He reached in, scooping the honey with his bare hand, unbothered by the stinging bees. He tasted it. Sweet. Unbelievably sweet. He laughed under his breath, the sound low and almost prophetic. Out of death, sweetness. From the jaws of what had sought to destroy him, nourishment now flowed. The feast in Timnah. Later that day, Samson arrived in Timnah with his parents. Preparations for the wedding were underway. Among the Philistines, custom demanded a 7-day feast, and Samson, though an Israelite, was determined to honor it. The Philistines selected 30 companions to be his friends for the occasion. They laughed loudly, their speech sharp and mocking, their eyes studying Samson as though measuring the strength in his arms. Samson, however, only smiled. He had a secret now, a riddle born from a lion's corpse and a handful of honey. On the second day of the feast, Samson stood before them and declared, "I will give you a riddle," he said, his deep voice silencing the hall. "If you can solve it within the 7 days of the feast, I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothes. But if you cannot, then you must give me the same." The Philistines jeered. "Speak your riddle, Israelite. We are not afraid of your games." Samson's eyes glimmered with cunning. He spoke slowly, each word deliberate. Out of the eater came forth meat, and out of the strong came forth sweetness. The hall murmured. The Philistines frowned, exchanging puzzled glances. What was this riddle? What eater? What strength? For 3 days they wrestled with it. They offered guesses, wild, foolish guesses, but none came close. The answer was hidden in Samson's secret, in the lion only he had slain, and the honey only he had tasted. The pressure builds. By the 4th day, frustration boiled over. The 30 companions cornered Samson's bride-to-be. Their laughter had vanished, replaced by sharp threats. "Coax your husband," they demanded, "or we will burn you and your father's house with fire. Did you invite us here just to rob us?" The young woman trembled. Fear and desperation clawed at her heart. That night, she wept before Samson, clinging to him. "You only hate me," she cried. "You have given my people a riddle, but you won't tell me the answer." Samson sighed, his strength useless in the face of her tears. "I haven't even told my father or mother," he said gently. "Why should I tell you?" But she persisted day after day, her sobs and pleading wearing him down like waves eroding a stone. And Samson, mighty enough to tear a lion apart, was no match for her persistence. The answer revealed. On the 7th day, the morning of reckoning, Samson finally relented. He whispered the secret to his bride, perhaps thinking she would keep it safe. But fear is louder than love. Before sunset, she told the 30 Philistine men. As the feast neared its end, they came to Samson, their faces smug with triumph. "What is sweeter than honey?" one of them asked mockingly. "And what is stronger than a lion?" Samson's eyes darkened. He knew immediately. "If you had not plowed with my heifer," he said coldly, "you would not have solved my riddle." The Spirit of the Lord. Anger burned within him. The betrayal stung, but the Spirit of the Lord stirred again, powerful, unstoppable. Samson left the feast in silence, his steps like rolling thunder. He went down to Ashkelon, another Philistine city. There, with the strength of heaven upon him, he struck down 30 men, stripped them of their garments, and delivered the spoils to those who had answered his riddle. But his heart burned with more than rage. It burned with the certainty that his life was no longer his own. For the lion was only the beginning. The foxes and the flames. Weeks passed since the riddle and the betrayal at Timnah. Samson's anger had cooled, and though his pride was wounded, his heart still yearned for the woman he had claimed as his bride. Determined to make peace, Samson prepared a gift, a young goat, and returned to Timnah. The father's refusal. Samson knocked on the door of his bride's house, his voice booming. "I will go in to my wife in her chamber." But her father stood in the doorway, trembling yet defiant. "You cannot," the man said. "I thought you utterly hated her, so I gave her to your companion. But her younger sister, she is fairer. Take her instead." Samson's jaw clenched, his hands curled into fists. Betrayal upon betrayal. First the Philistines, then his bride, and now her father. A storm gathered in his chest. "This time," Samson growled, "I shall be blameless in what I do to the Philistines." The foxes afire. That night, under a moonless sky, Samson stalked the fields of Timnah. He captured 300 foxes, swift and cunning, their eyes glowing in the dark. He worked tirelessly, tying them tail to tail, and between each pair he fastened a burning torch. When the last knot was tied, Samson lit the torches. The foxes bolted, scattering into the Philistines' fields like living firebrands. Through vineyards, olive groves, and standing grain they ran, their flames devouring everything in their path. The night exploded with light. The crackle of burning crops filled the air, mingled with the screams of Philistine farmers as their harvest, months of labor, vanished in a sea of fire. Samson watched from a hilltop, his face carved in stone, his eyes reflecting the inferno below. This was not mere vengeance. This was judgment. The Philistines strike back. By morning, the Philistines were in an uproar. Their wealth was reduced to ash. Their leaders demanded answers. "Who has done this?" they roared. "It was Samson," someone said, "the son-in-law of the Timnite, because his wife was given to his companion." The Philistines' anger was swift and merciless. They seized Samson's bride and her father and burned them with fire. When word reached Samson, his fury burned hotter than the fields he had set aflame. The Philistines had not only betrayed him, they had killed the one he once loved. The vengeance of Samson. Samson descended upon them like a storm. With nothing but his bare hands, he struck them down hip and thigh, a Hebrew phrase meaning with overwhelming slaughter. His enemies fell in heaps, their swords clattering uselessly against the earth. When the ground was soaked with the cost of his wrath, Samson withdrew to the cleft of the rock in Etam, a solitary place high in the hills. There he waited, his chest rising and falling, his heart heavy but unbroken. He was no longer merely a man seeking love or honor. He was becoming the weapon God had chosen to wield. The Philistine pursuit. But the Philistines were not done. They gathered an army and marched into Judah, camping at Lehi. The men of Judah, terrified, asked, "Why have you come against us?" "To bind Samson," the Philistines replied, "to do to him as he has done to us." 3,000 men of Judah, his own people, went up to the cleft of the rock and pleaded with Samson. "Don't you know the Philistines rule over us? What have you done?" Samson's gaze was unflinching. "I only did to them what they did to me." But the men of Judah, fearful of Philistine retaliation, bound him with 2 new ropes, promising not to kill him themselves. Samson allowed it, for he knew what was coming next. The jawbone of a donkey. The Philistine army swarmed across the land like locusts, their armor glinting under the sun. They came to Lehi with one goal, to capture Samson. Word spread quickly, and fear gripped Judah. To the people, Samson was no longer just a man. He was a spark threatening to ignite a war they weren't ready to fight. 3,000 men of Judah gathered and ascended to the cleft of the rock in Etam, where Samson sat in quiet strength, his long hair flowing over his shoulders like a banner of defiance. "Samson," they pleaded, "don't you see what you've done? The Philistines rule over us. They will destroy us all if we don't hand you over." Samson's gaze was unyielding. "Swear to me," he said, his deep voice steady, "that you will not kill me yourselves." "We swear," they replied. "We will only bind you and deliver you to them." Samson extended his hands. Without resistance, he allowed his own people to tie him with 2 new ropes, ropes so thick that no ordinary man could break them. The men of Judah led him down to Lehi, their hearts heavy, while the Philistine army waited in triumph. The roar of triumph. As Samson came into view, the Philistines erupted in a roar of victory. "There he is," they jeered. "The wild man of Zorah, bound at last." Their laughter rang like iron. But Samson stood still, his head lowered, his arms tied. Then, as the Philistines surged forward, ready to claim their prize, the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him. The ropes binding his arms snapped like flax burned in fire. He raised his head, his eyes blazing with holy fury. The jeering stopped. A hush fell over the battlefield. Samson looked around. There were no weapons, only the dry bones of a land. And there on the ground he saw it, the jawbone of a donkey. He bent down, gripped it in his hand, and turned to face an army. 1 man against 1,000. The Philistines charged. Samson roared, a sound like thunder rolling across the hills, and swung the jawbone with a strength no mortal could match. The first Philistine fell, his helmet split. Then another and another. The battlefield became a whirlwind of chaos. Shields shattered, Spears clattered uselessly against Samson's skin. With every swing, the jawbone struck down another foe. 10, 50, 100. The Philistines pressed in from every side, but Samson was an unyielding storm. His feet churned the dust into clouds, his arms a blur of righteous fury. 200, 500. By the time the dust settled, 1,000 men lay fallen. Their weapons littered the ground, but Samson stood unbowed, the jawbone dripping with the proof of his might. He lifted it high and cried out, "With the jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps. With the jawbone of a donkey, I have slain 1,000 men." The hills of Lehi echoed with his voice. The place called Ramath Lehi. When the last enemy fell, Samson cast the jawbone aside. His chest heaved, sweat mingling with dust. He looked upon the battlefield, a single man standing over an army, and he named that place Ramath Lehi, the hill of the jawbone. But then exhaustion hit him. His body, though mighty, was still human. Thirst clawed at his throat until his strength began to waver. Samson fell to his knees. "O Lord," he cried, "you have given this great deliverance by my hand. Shall I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?" And God, faithful as ever, split open a hollow place in the earth at Lehi. Water gushed forth. Samson drank, his strength returning like the tide. He rose again, towering and unshaken. From that day, Samson judged Israel for 20 years, his legend echoing across every hill and valley. But deep within, the roar of destiny still rumbled, for this was only the beginning of his war against the Philistines. From the roar of a lion to the clash of 1,000 warriors, Samson's story is a reminder that when the Spirit of the Lord comes upon you, no enemy is too great. But this is only the beginning. If you are inspired by this epic journey, hit like, share this story with others, and subscribe to Animate Bible Stories for more breathtaking tales straight from Scripture. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next episode. And remember, in every Bible story, there's more than history, it's His story.